The impact of Brexit on travel for British citizens has been well documented, with many reports highlighting the increased bureaucracy, the longer queues, and higher costs associated with cross-border travel. A recent article in the Mirror outlined 10 ways in which travel has worsened for Brits post-Brexit, ranging from new visa rules to longer queues at airports and Eurostar terminals. I just adjusted it to 11 though, because friends of mine traveled recently here as well. First, we have increased bureaucracy and paperwork. One of the most significant changes for British travelers has been the introduction of new visa requirements for EU countries. While some EU countries such as Ireland have granted visa-free travel to UK citizens, others such as France have implemented new visa rules that can be time-consuming and costly to apply for. This additional bureaucracy can be a major inconvenience for British travellers, especially those who travel frequently to the EU. And then secondly, we have longer queues at airports and Eurostar terminals. The introduction of new passport control procedures and increased custom checks has led to longer queues at airports and Eurostar terminals. This has been particularly problematic at major airports such as Heathrow and Gatwick, where delays can stretch for hours. The longer queues have also been blamed for increased congestions on the roads around airports, which can further disrupt travel plans. On 3, we have higher costs for travel. Brexit has also led to higher costs for travel, with both airlines and ferry companies increasing fares in response to the increased bureaucracy and paperwork. This has made travel to the EU more expensive for British citizens, particularly those on a budget. On 4, we have the reduced choice of airlines and routes. The number of airlines flying between the UK and the EU has decreased since Brexit, as some airlines have stopped operating routes due to the increased costs and complexity of travel. This has reduced the choice of airlines and routes for British travellers, making it more difficult to find the best deals. On 5, we have loss of free or discounted rail travel. Before Brexit, British citizens were eligible for free or discounted rail travel in many EU countries, such as France and Germany. And these benefits have been lost since Brexit, making rail travel to the EU more expensive for British citizens. On 6, we have delays and cancellations at Eurostar. Eurostar, the high-speed rail service between the UK and France, has experienced increased delays and cancellations since Brexit. These disruptions have been caused by a variety of factors, including increased border checks and staff shortages. On 7, we have UK lags behind in the race for green air fuel. The EU is forging ahead with cleaner, greener forms of air travel, while the UK is lagging behind, according to Matt Finch, policy manager at Transport and Environment. The transport expert criticized the UK for not having a sustainable aviation fuel mandate enshrined in law, as the EU does, meaning airlines and member states have a big incentive to adopt the cleaner fuel type, while the UK doesn't. In the next couple of years, the EU is stopping airlines receiving free pollution permits for all flights to and from the Union globally, while the UK is stopping just those flying domestically or to the EU. The tax-free status of kerosene, the most common type of jet fuel, may soon be phased out by the EU if tabled legislation is passed, given aviation firms massive incentive to master green tech. The UK has signalled that it has no plans to start taxing kerosene and even cut domestic air passenger duty last year, the closest thing they have to a jet fuel tax. The EU policy is designed to push airlines to decarbonize their operations. The base price of SAF is more expensive than fossil kerosene. Airlines are not voluntarily buying SAF, so by applying fuel duty to fossil fuel, this makes sustainable fuel a lot more attractive. And on 8, we have end of hassle-free long holidays and interrailing. Before Brexit, Brits could stay as long as they liked in the EU, and now a 90-day rule is in place. For trips to the Schengen area, covering most EU nations plus Switzerland, Norway, Iceland and several microstates, British passport holders can stay a maximum of 90 days in any 180 days. That has made very long holidays and trips around the continent on the likes of Interrail trickier for those with a dark blue passport in His Majesty's name. If you are found to breach the rules, you could be slapped with a 1-year entry ban, for example. And on 9, there's no more visa-free travel. From spring 2025, the new European Travel Information and Authorization System, the ETIAS scheme, will launch. And Brits will have to register online and pay a fee in advance to get permission to visit the EU, whereas EU residents won't. And it will cost €7 and have to be renewed every 3 years. And travelers will need to scan their passport or other travel document at a self-service kiosk each time they cross an EU border, with a new up-to-date system keeping track of them. On 10, we have stricter passport rules. UK passport strength falls in global rankings and, yes, could be set to tumble even further. And so much about this also wanted blue passport. Before Brexit, a passport wasn't required for Brits to travel to and from the Union, and any type of ID would do. Now a passport is required and it must meet third country visitor requirements. One such requirement is that it must be valid for at least 3 months after the date you intend to leave the EU country you are visiting. Over the past 2 years, many Brits have been called out by this rule and have been stopped from traveling, particularly as the valid until date can be earlier than the stated expiry date on the passport. And it's only 10 years at max, even if they extend it. And the passports are weaker, as I said. Since the British public voted to leave the European Union in 2016, the country's travel documents have had a serious fall in fortunes. While there may be a rich, patriotic blue following Brexit, they are of less practical use. Now the British passport sits in 22nd place in the passport index by Art and Capital, which looks at how many nations people from a given country can visit with and without visas. The UK passport gives access to 126 visa-free, 49 with a visa on arrival, and 26 with a visa acquired before travel. Many EU countries now sit above the UK in the rankings, including Poland in 14th place, and back in 2014 the UK sat third in the table. The impact of Brexit on travel for British citizens has been caused by a number of factors. And Brexit is the main factor, of course, but since Brexit, British travellers have been subject to new border controls and customs checks when entering and leaving the EU. And these checks have added to the time and hassle of travel and have also led to longer queues at airports and the Eurostar terminals. Before Brexit, British citizens were able to travel to most EU countries without a visa. However, since Brexit, many EU countries have introduced new visa requirements for British citizens, making it more difficult and expensive to travel to the EU. The UK's exit from the EU has made it more difficult for airlines and ferry companies to operate routes between the UK and the EU, and this has led to a reduction in competition, which has put upward pressure on prices. The UK received significant funding from the EU for transport infrastructure projects. However, since Brexit, the UK has lost access to this funding, which has made it even more difficult to invest in new infrastructure and services. And Brexit has added to the bureaucracy and paperwork associated with travel between the UK and the EU. This has made it more time-consuming and costly to travel, and has also discouraged some people from traveling altogether. The negative impact of Brexit on travel is likely to be felt for many years to come. The UK's relationship with the EU is still uncertain, and we have to see what the new government will do, and there is no guarantee that things will improve in the future. As a result, British travellers are likely to continue to face increased costs, delays and inconvenience when travelling to the EU. And if you want to know more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.